Amazing. So, many of the studies that have tested the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis have tested the recognition and recall of color. Some of these have involved participants of the Native American cultures, and some have involved participants from other parts of the world. So, the Zuni was basically another group, you would say, with the Native Americans. So, Roger Brown and Eric Lenenberg um, studied the Zuni people of New Mexico in the US and Native American culture. Brown and Lenneberg argue that if a basic color word is absent from from a particular language, this would affect how easily that color is recognized and recalled. They found that Zuni had only one word for shades of yellow and orange, and they also found that Zuni had more difficulty when it came to recalling these colors compared to English speakers. This suggests that difficulty distinguishing between yellow and orange could be because of a lack of words for these two colors in Zuni language. So again, we're talking about thought and language, right? So it does communicate for communication. Does the thought come first or the language comes first? So they're saying that it was very difficult for them to recognize the thought of what color it was because they did not have a word for it. So and for the colors that they had words for, it was relatively easier for them to recall that word. So they're talking about yellow and orange in particular. So these junior native people had just staple names for all of the colors. They did not define everything by shade. And so just give me a second. Yeah, sorry. So they did not have different shades as per definitions. However, so that is what they're telling, that because they did not have a certain language for it, it was difficult for them to think about it. So that's one evaluation. One weakness they're saying is that the researcher involving other cultures is that participants may not have fully understood the task, or researchers may have misunderstood the answers. For example, the Zuni people may have been able to distinguish between the colors but didn't communicate this ability to the researcher because of a language barrier. This means that the research lacks validity. Now, because they spoke a different language, they're just saying that it is very much possible that these people were giving the right answers or did not have a lot of difficulty. However, because the researchers had this language barrier within themselves and the Zuni people, which might have led to them not understanding what was really happening, or might have led them to misrepresent the results, basically, which obviously lacks validity. And now they're talking about how language affects recall of colors. So Robertson studied the Berrinmo people of New Guinea who live in a remote forest environment. The Berenmo have five color names: one for green, one for blue and purple, one for yellow, orange and brown, one for all dark colors, one for white and all light colors, one for all shades of red and pink. When the Berenmo were tested, they could only recall the colors which matched their color names. They had also trouble distinguishing between colors that were not separate within their language, for example, green and blue. This is further evidence for Sapir-Whorf hypothesis that the idea that the cognitive processes such as recognition and recall are influenced by language. So basically, again, so these people did not have specific names for all the colors; they just had categories, sort of, right? So everything white and everything light would be categorized under one name. So like we now call it pastels, right? So that everything's that's like beige, mint, lemon, we just call it pastels. We, even though yes, we know the differentiations as well, but then that's what I'm trying to explain, that we just call it pastels. And then for everything that is, let's say, black, gray, we just go with solids, right? So that's, we also have categories. So in their language, they did not have specifications, they had categories, which actually made it difficult for them to not only recall but also differentiate between, let's say, if they're shown blue and green, for them blue and green lies in the same category. So how can they even say what's blue, what's different, because for them it's the same category. So that's what they're saying, for that yes, language is important in order to recall, um, because then only a person can get the right answers or identify the right way. So the evaluation is one weakness of this research, is that some researchers have found a different result. So some researchers have said that no, you're wrong. So they said that people with different color words were still equally good at recalling color. So the color words basically, they do not affect recalling. That is what they found. However, what's stated here in Robertson's study is that language does affect your color recall. And they're given an example of the study. So they said Eleanor and Donald tested the Dani of New Guinea, who have only two words for color, mola and mili. which basically correspond to light and dark. Dani and English speakers, Dani and English speakers, yes, were given a colored chip such as shown in the chart to look at for a short period, and they had to pick the chip out of the set of 40 other chips of similar color. Both groups made a lot of mistakes, but the Dani were no worse at doing this than the English speaking participants. So they're saying that, the recall was basically same between the English speaker participants and the Dani people. So it was no differentiations when they were shown color and then asked to pick out one color within those colors, even though they did not have differentiations with it. So language is not affecting recall of color. That's what they're stating in evaluation, which they're saying that your results are wrong because we've found something else. Are we clear till here?
Yes.
Amazing. So now we have human and animal communication. Okay. So Carl von Frisch. It's such a difficult name. Frisk, Frisk, whatever. Okay. So we're going to call him Carl von. Studied the activity of honeybees over many years. His initial studies were trying to show that these insects were not colorblind and were attracted by the brightest and most colorful flowers. As he studied them, however, he noticed something about the way in which the honeybees communicated with the other bees in the colony. They danced. So one's discovery could change the way scientists thought about animal communication forever. So one aimed to carefully describe the dances performed by the bees and explain how these enable bees to communicate information to each other. So one very largely there's a lot of largely belief facts for bees. However, this one was that they are basically attracted by the most colorful flowers. That is why they go and they suck nectar from those flowers, and all of their plantation performances happen within the flowers that are the brightest and the most beautiful, right? Most colorful, most attractive, basically. So one over here said that it's not just that, it's also that they perform a dance once they have done this. Once, let's say, they have found an attractive flower, but there's this also this dance which they perform in order to communicate to the other bees. So they go back basically and perform this dance. So he basically wanted to, his aim was just to see that whether this dance thing that he had noticed was a part of communication to other bees, right? So because obviously animal communication is also a thing. So the method was that he was an ethologist, okay, um, someone who studies an animal in its natural habitat. So mostly he was just observing bees as he went about their daily business. However, he would sometimes change aspects of bees' environment to study how this behavior, how this changed their behavior. For example, one would put source one would put a food source close to the hive, as well as one further away. He made more than 6,000 observations of honeybees over a period of 20 years. He found that worker honeybees tell other worker honeybees where sources of pollen are when they have found them. They do this by um, performing a sequence of movements which they call a dance, which gives important signals to other um, honeybees. So there were two types of dances. The round dance, which was basically if food is found in less than 100 meters away, the returning bee moves around in a circle, sometimes changing direction. The audience of the bee workers who see this dance know that the food source is nearby and will fly around close to the hive until they find it. The woggle dance, this is more of a complex. The bee moves around in a figure of eight. On the straight section in the middle of the eight, the bee woggles its abdomen. Wow, okay. The direction of the straight line in this part of the dance indicates that the watching bees, which show direction of the pollen, is in. Also, the slower the bee performs the dance, the further away the pollen is. In this way, okay, amazing. So basically, what he found out, he conducted 6,000 observations, and within these 6,000 observations, he wanted to see that how are honeybees actually communicating. And what he found within this is that, sometimes he also manipulated the situation a bit by just placing the food closer than it actually was, right? So if the food is like, let's say 3,000 meters away, he actually placed it, let's say, within a 100 meters and see if that actually changed the movements, right? So what he found out was that yes, there were two sorts of dances. That the round dance was basically that they were saying that it's close, it's within 100 meters, and that you have to just fly around this round circle that we are in and go and get the food. It basically told other worker bees, okay. So I'm pretty sure you are aware that bees basically have, let's say, a status problem as well. They have the queen bee, they have the king bee who's with the queen bee, and then they have worker bees and everything. So there's like a lot of differentiations over there. And then they talked about the woggle dance, which was basically formation of an eight, okay, which was basically after formation of an eight. So the eight was signifying that yes, there is food, but far. And then the bee would come in the middle of where the eight is formulating, and then it would move its abdomen in a certain direction. So towards the right would mean towards the right, but far away. And if the dance is slower, okay, so that means that it is further away. It's not close at all. So this is how it would communicate the location of where the food is with other bees. So he found that after watching the dancing honeybees, 60% of the audience of honeybees went to that food source wherever they were telling. So whatever the signs were saying, so he presumed those and actually saw that yes, other bees actually would go to that sign, would follow that sign. So conclusions were that one's work showed that bees have a sophisticated form of animal communication. The speed and accuracy with which bees found food suggests that the bee dance had given valuable information. The bee signaling system has evolutionary value because it helps survival. Are we clear? Amazing. Just give me a minute, okay? I'll be right back. Okay. So evaluating the study. So they're saying that one strength is that his work made an important contribution to science. So basically, it was really applicable. Bees were based on his observation of bees was based on careful observation over many years, as well as meticulous and objective recording. So he was basically um, he was very proper with his research. So he did not just state something that he noticed. It was recorded. He had seen it over 6,000 observations, invested so much of his time and everything, and he was given a lot of awards as well. So that is why his work is very credible. That is why it's a strength. One weakness is that the importance of sound was overlooked. Um so he missed some aspects of bees communication. A study by Harold found that when bees perform these dances in silence, other bees then would not then go and investigate food sources. Most of the time, worker bees will make sounds during this dance. So they're saying that he basically overlooked sounds which he shouldn't have done, because that is also a signal of communication. Another weakness is that bees do not always respond to the waggle dance. So, waggle, woggle, whatever it is. One thought that other bees would always respond to the waggle dance. However, this may not be true. The honeybee audience may not always automatically react to waggle dance when they see it. A study by James Gold found that bees would not use the information from the waggle dance to fly to nectar if it had been placed in a boat in the middle of a lake. So they're just basically saying that that one finding was a little flawed because they wouldn't always respond to this particular dance, because it also depends on the situation or the area that they are in. um are we clear till here?
Yeah.
Let me just, I'm so curious to know the pronunciation. Just okay, it's waggle, and then the other one is how to pronounce.
Sprisk, I think.
Yeah, probably. Amazing. Yeah, it's something like that only. Okay. Right. Okay. So we're on human versus animal communication. We already looked at both of them separately, combining the two. So animal communication, the exchange of information between animals, including humans within the same species, including a variety of signals. Some of these signals are vocal, which involve sound, and some are visual or involve smell. Just a second. I'm so sorry. And then we have language, a communication system unique to humans. It consists of a set of arbitrary conventional symbols, etc., etc. So basically, they're talking about how animal communication is towards, being showing signals or being a little vocal. However, when you talk about language, so that's a part of mostly human communication because it is communicating through words. Um, so animal communication comes in different forms and serves different functions. On the previous spread, we looked at one example, honeybees communicating by dancing. Although animals do not talk in the same way humans do, except in Disney films, they use various signals to communicate. Some of these signals are sound-based, others involve visual or smell. However, communication always involves the transfer of information from one or more animals, the senders, to one or more animals, the receivers. So, survival. An obvious function of communication is to increase an animal's survival and that of its offspring. Vervet monkeys produce specific sounds that warn other vervet monkeys of particular dangers, known as alarm calls. The particular breed of monkey has four different predators: leopards, eagles, pythons, and baboons. If a vervet monkey catches sight of any of the predators, they will produce a specific sound, etc., etc. This is so much more like studying about animals rather than psychology. But what they're trying to tell is that there are different ways an animal communicates, and they've given us an example of vervet monkeys, which basically make these alarm calls to make sure that to inform their the other species, or inform their community that there is danger ahead, okay, and there's danger coming towards them, and for the danger they've stated the four predators that they basically have. um then they're saying animal communication does not have to be vocal. When threatened, a rabbit will lift its tail high, pin its ears, and leap forward as a way of signaling danger to other rabbits. So they are just showing changes within their body, which shows that okay, a predator is also coming. So doesn't always have to be vocal either. Then talking about reproduction. So and these reasons are basically survival is one reason why they would communicate. So they're talking about reproduction too. So now they're saying to attract a mate, many animals use mating displays to signal to other members of the species that they want to reproduce. For example, a male peacock produces a very well-known mating display, so that he basically dances, in order to convince and formulates this umbrella. And many people have also seen that. It's very, they do it open in the air. Such mating displays have developed a means of communication. The genetic fitness of an individual, brightly colored and plentiful plumage, shows that the individual is healthy. So basically, they look, even the females, when they have to decide. So basically, pros and cons, green flags and red flags. So they look at how colorful the male peacock is and everything, because that basically shows that his how strong his genetics are basically. So that's one another reason why they communicate, for reproduction purposes. Then they have territory. So many animals mark their territory using the signal of scent marking. They do this by spreading their urine, feces, or other naturally produced scents to discourage other animals from invading their territory. White rhinos lay their dung in piles to mark their territory, a bit like a very smelly fence post, of course. So again, another reason is that they want to mark their territory. For that, they use another form of communication, which is scent. And let's not discuss how they're doing that. And then for another reason is food. So bee dance would be an example for that. Some animals use pheromones to signal food. A pheromone is a chemical that an animal releases. It is detected by other animal species. Like we also um, like dopamine. We when we are having an adrenaline rush, we also communicate that. So they are also basically communicating a chemical that they're releasing. Are we clear till here?
Yeah.
Amazing. Now we've got properties of human animal communication. Human communication not present in animal communication. So one is obviously language. Plan ahead and discuss future events. An important feature of human language is that we are able to talk and obviously plan and everything. And they're saying the idea of human language enables communication about things that are not in the present and may not even exist, like ghosts or leads united chances of promotion. It's called displacement. So we basically can plan, okay, and we can discuss what we're thinking, and we can discuss what we're going to do and what we need from another person. But then that's obviously lacking in animal communication. Maybe animal communication does consist of being able to communicate what you require or what you need and everything, but everything beyond that, in the sense that planning ahead or just knowing what's going to happen, that's not something that they can do. Creativity is another. Animals are much more restricted in how they use signals. Animal communication is a closed system. The gestures, sounds, and movements that animal use only refer to very specific events, right? Obviously. So it's obviously either about food or reproduction. It's very, less ways of communication. Like with us, we can communicate even with eyes, like we can communicate with fingers, gestures, whatnot. Now, that's not very easy or even present with animal communication, because obviously they just have specific ways, and not even specific ways for everything, but specific ways for only certain things. So that's another. And single versus multiple channels. So finally, human language can be expressed using a whole range of different methods or channels. I am able to tell you what's on my mind using spoken language. I could also write it down, as I said. So you can use a lot of ways to communicate a certain thing. But with animals, you are restricted. You can only use one way, and not even to communicate everything, but only to communicate a certain thing. Are we clear till here? Pretty basic.
Yes.
Okay, now we're on non-verbal communication, which is obviously, maybe over here it's written eye contact, which we will focusing on, but generally your clothing also refers to non-verbal communication. Even if you're going to a doctor and a doctor is dressed in a certain way, that too is a non-verbal communication, in the sense that you might think, this is just an example I'm giving it, which basically helps people understand this whole topic as a whole. But basically, let's say you go to a doctor, and a doctor is in literally, like, let's say, shorts and like a t-shirt, right? So you would be like, so unprofessional. You would be like, that's non-verbal communication. Now he hasn't said that he's unprofessional. You just saw the way he's dressed, and you're like, okay, yeah, that's unprofessional. You communicated without having to use anything else, right? So similarly, that's one part of non-verbal communication. And if a doctor is, let's say, dressed in a whole lab coat and everything, in a suit and a lab coat, and has all the accessory that he needs and everything, then you'll be like, okay, yeah, wow, I made the right decision. Again, he hasn't said that you made the right decision. You just assume that based on the non-verbal communication you had via his dress code. So another way is eye contact. What more common and more important way? uh, Eye contact, we basically know when two people look at each other the same way, especially with our mums, of course. Non-verbal communication is exchanging information without words. Verbal communication is using words. So not verbal and non-verbal communication refers to passing of information from one person to another. These days, communication comes in many forms, including conversations over text, email, and other social media. Communication can be divided into two types: verbal communication and non-verbal communication. So verbal communication is any communication that involves just a second. Sorry. You need to please go out. You are interrupting me constantly. I don't care. Let it be. Sorry. Yeah. So, um, Right. So verbal communication is any communication that involves spoken or written words. For example, having a conversation or reading something, etc., etc. Non-verbal is when you do not use words. So facial expressions, a smile, knitted brows, shows happiness or anger. Body language, uh, such as hunched shoulders, like you like bowing down a little, would show sadness. Sounds which convey meaning, such as a tone of, even say that's like disappointment. There you go. That's another sound. You're not using words. So, and then one important form is eye contact. So, what is eye contact? When people basically talk to each other face to face and make eye contact, or generally make eye contact within a conversation. So, regulating flow of conversation, eye contact makes conversations run smoothly by giving the other person feedback about listeners' level of interest and emotional state. Obviously, when you have eye contact and you're probably nodding your head and you're like looking alert, so that means that yes, you're listening. A study by Adam Kendon involved pairs of participants meeting for the first time. They were secretly watched through a two-way mirror. Kendon found that eye contact was most important in encouraging turn taking and conversation. So, most speakers would look away when they were about to speak and prolong eye contact when they were about to finish talking. This signal to the other person that it is my turn to talk, it is your turn to talk. If this did not happen, there were awkward pauses in the conversation. So this is something which we practice in everyday life as well, but it's very difficult for us to even notice it. But basically, initially when we're speaking to someone, we don't really have um like we can't have a set schedule that I'm going to stop speaking at this minute and you start speaking then. So it's basically when we start speaking, we look around, but then when we're like ending and making sure that the other person understands, we start looking them in the eye, and then they also realize that okay, now they're looking at me in the eye, which means that I probably have to take stand now. I have to start speaking. The next time you talk to someone, you'll probably be noticing that. Then we have signaling attraction. That's another way of eye contact. So, eye contact is one of the first signals we use to communicate our attraction to someone. We may check the person out from a distance. Also, our level of eye contact may increase when we are up close or talking to somebody we like. So, a study by Claire Conway suggests that most people who maintain eye contact are judged by to be more attractive than people who do not. So, this is also something we know generally in life. Um, Basically to show attractiveness, to show whether you find the other person attractive or would want a relationship with them, whatever, and not just that, but a lot of people feel that eye contacts are a very attractive way to communicate this rather than just saying it out loud. Then we have expressing emotion, so using eye contacts and also to express emotion. So a study by Reginald Adams and Robert Kleck gave participants pictures of faces showing different emotions: joy, anger, fear, and sadness. Some of the faces showed a direct gaze looking straight at the participant, while the other shows an averted gaze which was looking away, and the participants had to judge how intense the emotion was in the picture. It was found that joy and anger were judged to be most intense when they were in a direct gaze, and fear and sadness were, so basically it depends on your positioning of the eye as well. So your where are you looking while you're doing a certain thing. Okay, so that also matters to a very great extent. So right, this whole cartoon on this page which says annoyed, what gave it away, shows a lot about the whole thing that we've studied. One strength is that eye contact studies can help people to develop the skill. Obviously, when you read about it, you probably will use it and understand okay that this is a thing as well. So that is a good application to real world. Then they're saying one weakness of eye contact studies is using of rating scales to make judgments. So the studies by Conway and Adams and Clegg both made use of rating scales to make judgments about attractiveness and intensity of emotion. Rating scales are not very objective measures. They rely on people's opinion of attractiveness, etc. So if you're literally asking us, well, once you've observed a certain thing, and if you're literally asking the person, so they might be able to, lie and deny it as well. So it's literally self-report that they're not always very objective or very honest. And then another weakness is that some studies of eye contacts involve quiet artificial tasks. So in the Kendall study, participants were asked to get to know someone as a part of the experiment. This is quite an artificial situation. It may not be the same as people meet in real life. So it's not as candid. It's not as um, natural. So that's basically lacks validity. Are we following till here?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Just a second. Looking at non-verbal communication. So again, we looked at eye contact. Now we're just looking at body language. Now, what is body language? They're saying the way in which attitudes and feelings are communicated to others through unspoken movements and gestures. So closed postures is having arms or legs crossed in a closed posture, which suggests that the person is in disagreement with what is being said or is possibly annoyed. Or open posture is a rather relaxed posture without arms or legs being crossed. It is an open posture which suggests that someone listening in a social interaction is in agreement with what is being said. Then we have postural echo, which means a similarity or mirroring of body positions by people in a social i- interaction. Postural echo tends to suggest that two people are getting on well and are friendly towards each other. Non-verbal, we already know what that is. So we have understood what is body language, and we know that it's basically your attitude and your unspoken movements. So whatever movements that you're showing within your walk, the way you sit, the way you stand, every single thing. And then they're discussing open and closed posture. So posture is in the way which someone positions their body during a social interaction. Crossing your legs during a conversation would be an example of closed posture. Psychologists have suggested that this shows rejection or disagreement with what is being said. I'm always sitting with a closed posture. This is not okay. In contrast, an open posture is more relaxed and tends to show approval or acceptance. So, Hugh McGinley and his colleagues did an experiment where participants were shown slides of a woman Confederate discussing her views on various topics, such as whether to give tips to waiters or using nuclear weapons. Participants were asked their own views beforehand and again after viewing the slides. So, basically, what happened was that they would be asked their own views and then they would view the slides and then their posture would be studied in order to see does their posture actually relate to the own views that they had given. So if they disagree with nuclear war and then when they're looking at the slides and while she's talking about in support of nuclear wars, so are they sitting in a closed posture now because they were against it? So if they disagree, are they sitting in a certain sort of posture that they wanted? That's the something that they wanted to see. um Talking about postural echo, so this is called just basically friends or people who just getting along and they are mirroring each other's body position, so like adjusting to it basically. So an experiment by Rob Tanner and Tanya investigated the effect of postural echo on people's attitude towards a new product. Participants were asked to give feedback about a new drink called Weiger. um, with one group of where am I? Yeah, with one group of participants, the researchers used postural echo and copied the body language and gestures to the participants during the interview. There was no attempt to do this with the other group. At the end of the experiment, those participants who had experienced postural echo were more likely to say that they liked the drink and thought it was successful in the future. This suggests that postural echo had produced positive feelings towards the researchers and the drink during the interview. So basically, just because they were adjusting to one another's not postures, so basically, if one person was actually like okay nice or maybe enjoying it or moving a little bit to it, so the other person would basically adapt from that and adjust to the same thing, which actually resulted in a more similar feedback and a positive one as well. So then we have touch. So there are many different types of touch in social interaction. These may include handshakes, high fives, slapping someone on the back, putting a hand on someone's shoulder. Touch can be used to express feeling or show dominance. In a study by Jeffrey and colleagues, female students in a library were handed books by a librarian. Half of the students were touched lightly on the hand by the librarian, and the other half were not. When asked afterwards, those students who were touched spoke more positively about the librarian than those who were not. So yes, a touch can be reaffirming if it's given in the right sense, of course. So that's another thing that they're talking about, that it is also a sign of communication without having to use word. It is something that comes under posture as well. Are we clear till here?
Yeah.
Amazing. So now we have one strength of studies of body language is that they can be applied to real world situation as it was applied to this library. So a rapport can be built. So that is basically having a relationship, having a bond basically between people just by using non-verbal communication as well, just by using posture, just by using touch. Body language studies lack control. So one weakness of the body language studies, it is not all extraneous variables are controlled, because obviously something else might be the reason a person rates someone as a certain way or are influenced a certain way. It is not just the posture of the other person. So there may be other reasons why participants liked or disliked the Confederate. For example, in the library study on touch, there was no attempt to control for other aspects of non-verbal communication. For example, what if the librarian smiled or maintained eye contact, or they just like the way she's dressed, so those factors were not controlled. Um, So you can't really say that it was the touch that actually resulted in positive feelings or whatever. And then body language studies are unethical. So they, in the studies of posture and touch, the participants who are approached are not aware that the person is interacting. So obviously they're being deceived because they do not know that a, they're being studied, or they do not know that this, all of this is just an act. So that might just, harm them in a certain way, and they're not even taking permission if it's related to, let's say, touch or conversations or whatever. So that's all of that is, coming under deception. So again, non-verbal communication of personal space. Just a second, let me see. um, Darwin's theory, non-verbal behavior in it alone, UK's. Okay, yeah, we're like closer towards the end, which is great. Simpler chapters actually end sooner than we think. Okay, so personal space is another form of non-verbal communication. So again, how much distance we keep within a person, that's basically the personal space that we are offering them. So it is an invisible and portable bubble that surrounds each individual. The size of the bubble varies from depending who are we with. So if we are for, obviously if you're with a friend, we basically do not, let's say, have a lot of personal space. Or let's say if you're with a family or mom, right? So we have zero personal space. There's no filter. There's no bubble. But let's say if you're like with someone we had just met, we probably have a series of personal space. We probably have this bubble around us that you cannot step into this without our consent. So that's what the personal space is all about. So again, personal space is the distance we keep between ourselves and others in everyday life. So again, a bubble around us. Personal space is flexible and can change depending on who we are with or the professional role that we are in. Personal space may be affected by culture, gender, and status. So women generally have a larger personal space. Okay, they have a larger bubble. They value their personal space more than men do. Similarly with culture, most cultures are, let's say, a little closed rather than other cultures which are open, do not really have the concept of personal space, are more um, no filter, just themselves. And then status, of course, when you're talking about the elite, they tend to have a greater personal space than when we talk about the working class people. So cultural differences, I don't even know how to pronounce this name, but Sorokovska questioned almost 9,000 people from 42 different countries, asking them to indicate on a drawing their preferred distance when in a conversation with a stranger, acquaintance, or friend. They found large cultural differences. For example, people from Saudi Arabia gave a mean figure of about 125 centimeter from strangers, 95 from friends, whereas people in England gave 155. So obviously, culture was one influence as to how great their personal space would be. Gender differences, it seems that women use personal space differently, as I just said. Men generally prefer a larger social distance when interacting with other men than women prefer interacting with other women. Okay, so it will be opposite when it comes to us. So women interacting with men would be larger, compared to men interacting with women. They would have less personal space. So when a woman is interacting with another woman, yes, no personal space. When a man is interacting with another man, definitely personal space. However, when a woman is interacting with a man, she will have more personal space than he will. That's a fact. Okay. Um, there are also gender differences. For example, Dorm found that when talking to friends, men prefer to sit opposite one another while women prefer to sit side by side to gossip. How do the sexes react if their personal space is invaded? Jeffrey Fisher and Dorm Bryan set up a study where a confederate would invade the personal space of men and women in a library. This would happen either from the front or from the side. Female participants said they felt more stressed and uncomfortable when a stranger invaded their personal space from the side, whilst the men from the front were more uncomfortable. This would seem that they, to be clear, but obviously they have clear differences between personal space. So even in the study, if they were invaded from the side, the women felt more uncomfortable, but then when invaded from the front, the men felt more uncomfortable. Then we have status differences, so might be defined as someone's rank and position. So Lawrence found that people who have equal or similar status tend to maintain a close working space. In the study, 45 workers from a manufacturing firm were observed at work. It was observed that people of lower status did not approach the people of higher status. Okay, so that's something we have discussed, something that is a given. Then we have, um, so one strength of personal space research is that it can help us know how to interact in daily life, so we know how to interact with women, we know how to interact with someone from the higher class. We generally understand and grasp the knowledge we can have about a person's personal space and respect that. So that it's basically providing information, hence it is a real world application. It is helping us in some sense or the other. One weakness of research studies into personal spaces that they only look at one factor at a time. So each of the studies described on the facing page tends to only focus on one factor. So what about other factors? So if you're focusing only on gender or only on status, what about it is combined with other factors? So in these 45 factory workers, what if they're not approaching for other reasons, such as, maybe language differences, or the other person does not know their language? You are not looking at extraneous variables. That is very reductionist. um, Unrepresentative samples. Another weakness of personal space research is that studies involve unrepresentative samples, so there's not large samples. So you cannot generalize it by saying that all men are like this or all women are like this, because you are literally studying a very limited sample. Are we clear?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to stop here. So we have Darwin's theory left, and then we have innate or learn left, which is pretty simple. And then we have Yuki's theory left, and then we're done. So this is something we should be done in the next 10 minutes in our next class. So first 10 minutes we'll be doing this, and then the next one, we if I'm the document so sorry. So the document that I had shared with you, I you haven't really completed the paper one, so we're going to try and complete that only, because we're going to have enough 50 minutes, and within that paper, or just, we're going to try and do that. Let's say 10 minutes we allocate to this, 30 minutes we allocate to that paper, so that I know that whatever's, you know uh let's say whatever's a little fishy with your answer pattern, if there is anything, and then we would be left with 20 minutes, for which what we can do is that we can just review some question papers only, and see if there's any confusing questions with it. Fair?
Yeah.
Amazing. So you can go. Thank
Okay.
you.